All right, let's talk idioms. Hi, my name is Umar and I am ecstatic to be here with you today. Before we start though, let me give you a little bit of background. So idioms are an interesting and controversial topic on the SAT because idioms aren't really something you can practice, right? If you think about all the other topics we've gone over in this channel, subject-verb agreement, parallelism, modifiers, these are all things you can work at, right? You can do practice problems. For idioms, though, all it requires is a knowledge of the English language. And for some people, that's really easy. Some people are born in America. Some people speak English from the day they were 3 years old. For other people, though, who have English as a second language, this can become much harder because there are some things, just like in any language, there are some things that are said in English that just can't be translated. So today, I'm going to teach a lesson from a point of view of someone who learned English as a second language. So if you speak English as your native language, you understand the language, this is going to be really basic for you. If you don't have English as your native language, as your first language, this could be very beneficial. So let's get right into it. So the rule of thumb is going to be the think, speak. Sound everything out loud, and then understand if it makes sense, if there's something you need to add. But first, you just have to sound it out. Next thing you're going to want to do is delete all distractions. We've done this before. Cross everything out that's not pertinent to the question, and you're going to know when it's not pertinent. It's going to be completely obvious in the sentence. Sometimes, and most of the time, you're going to have a phrase that's going to be pertinent, and that's it. There's going to be a whole sentence as a question. You're going to narrow it down to a phrase. And I'm going to recommend everyone to read outside sources such as the New York Times. And the reason why I say the New York Times is because the New York Times has been proven to be giving vocabulary and the level of reading that is required is similar, if not exactly, the level of reading that is required for the SAT reading and the syntax and grammar that is required for the SAT grammar. So I'm going to recommend you read all those articles. Then I want you guys to think, after you've deleted all distractions, you have a basic knowledge of idioms, how would you say it? Don't even look at the question. Think about what the question is trying to say and ask yourself, how would you say it? And this is all going to make sense in the question I have next. Finally, have you heard of this idiom before? Have you heard of something similar to this idiom before when you were talking with someone? Think about all these articles you've read, all the classwork you've done, all the homework you've written, all the people you've talked to. Is there something that seems familiar? Guess in your head and never change your answer. So let's move right on to a question. As always, these questions are on cracksat.net. It's an open forum source, and anyone can contribute and ask questions. So let's get right into it. India, a diverse country containing a mix of cultures and customs within its borders, is famous in its warm hospitality, its spicy rice dishes, and its embrace of many different spiritualities. Now, as much as I love the sentence about India and all the different details that are associated with it, it's not important. Let's just delete all of this. First things first, this is not necessary. It's just going to confuse you. Maybe we can leave this, but all of this stuff doesn't matter. We're just looking at this one phrase right here, is famous in. Don't look at these answer choices at the bottom. Think about it. Is famous in. Have you heard of something similar? A similar idiom, something in the news? When I think of this, let's give an example. I think of LeBron James. LeBron James is famous for basketball. What else? India is famous for rice. Think about an idiom, a sentence with famous, right? And see what comes after. What preposition comes after? Is it in? I can't think of a single time where in is used after famous. Famous in, famous in. There's nothing really. The idiom here is for. People are famous for things. Items and countries are famous for their qualities. So I think we're looking for famous for. So A is going to be wrong. B is going to be wrong. D is going to be wrong, and C is going to be the right answer. Now the question becomes, what happens if you guess the idiom, right, in your head, and you can't find it in the answer choices? So let's say I guessed famous with, and I don't see famous with here. First of all, I know that my preposition is wrong. Then I'm going to think, is there a second best answer? And the way I do this is always through process of elimination. Which one sounds completely off? Famous in sounds pretty off. I can't think of anything that has to do with famous in. There's no sentence I can think of that has that phrase. So I think famous in would be completely off. Famous on, again, that's not an idiom you hear. Maybe famous to, if you're in between famous to and famous for, I've heard famous for many more times than I've heard famous to. So that's when I'm just going to use that process of elimination, choose C. So there's many ways to attack these, even if you're not a native English speaker. All right, so let's move on to question 2. Asymmetrical warfare is another name for guerrilla-style tactics when a smaller force must engage a much larger force to battle. All right, once again, first thing, we're going to delete all this stuff. As interesting as it is, we don't need it. Let's keep a couple of things though. Engage, we should keep, because engage is the verb here. So we'll keep must engage a much larger force to battle. So the phrase we're looking for is must engage a force to battle. You engage to battle. Do you engage to battle? I'm not looking at the answer choices. I'm going to think of engage idioms with engage. Engage, not engage for, engage on battle, engage with battle, engage in battle. You engage in battle. That makes the most sense. So right off the bat, I'm thinking, okay, the two that makes sense to me is engage with and engage in. And keep in mind, I haven't looked at the answer choices yet, so I don't know. Maybe both are in there, maybe one is in there. So let's start with that, and then let's move on. So no change, engage to battle. Remember that I'm using the verb, and then I'm using the preposition. That's the idiom here. You could also delete this and just keep that phrase, the entire idiom. Whatever you choose to be the idiom, make sure to keep it small so you don't get confused. Engage a much larger force to battle. Yeah, I haven't heard that ever. It doesn't sound good. Reading any New York Times article, talking with people, if you think about movies with commanders, military commanders, do they say engage to battle? I don't think so. So A, no change is going to be incorrect. All right, let's look at B. Warfare must engage a much larger force for battle. All right, so for battle. Okay, so this might make a little bit of sense, right? There's still something a little bit off about it. When I think of idioms with for, I'm thinking of some sort of preparation for, doing preparation for a project, doing some sort of speaking for an event, speaking for people. For is almost a sort of transaction. It indicates a transaction. You do something for someone. Here, we aren't engaging for battle. We aren't receiving battle. We are engaging in battle. We are putting ourselves in the battle, engaging at battle, engaging in battle. We aren't exchanging our engagement for the battle, if that makes sense. I guess to draw a picture, if this dot was all our armies, our military weapons and everything, and this was the battle. This is where the battle is occurring, right here. We are engaging ourselves into battle, right? We go to the battle. There isn't a transaction where we engage in battle and then in exchange, the battle comes to us. No, the battle stays the same. We engage in the battle. So B is going to be wrong. I don't think it's engage for battle. All right, let's look at C. Asymmetrical warfare is another name for guerrilla-style tactics when a smaller force must engage a much larger force in battle. This is what I was talking about. This makes a lot of sense. You engage in battle. You place yourself in the location of the battle. The battle doesn't have to do anything because it's an object. It doesn't react to your engagement, but you do engage in the battle, as I've drawn in this picture over here. So C looks very plausible to me. Let's look at D. Asymmetrical warfare is another name for guerrilla-style tactics when a smaller force must engage a much larger force with battle. And remember, I was talking about with battle being definitely a plausible choice. But looking at this picture here, it's not like the engagement and the battle over here are working side by side. Remember, if you're confused at any point, draw that picture, take the extra step. By drawing this picture, you can see that the person, the battle, right? You aren't engaging with the battle. You are engaging in the battle. You are going to the battle. The battle and you aren't working together to accomplish something. You are going to the setting that is the battle. So D is going to be wrong because the preposition with, it implies that you're collaboratively working on something. And you're not. You're not working together on anything. You're engaging in the battle. The battle is a setting. It's passive. It's not doing anything. Therefore, C is going to be the right answer here and not D. So as I said before, if you're ever confused on any of these, don't be afraid to draw the picture. No one's going to see that you drew a picture on the side. Especially because a lot of us are visual learners. So we understand better when we can look at something and comprehend it that way, instead of just listening to it or reading the words. So keeping that in mind, let's look at this one. In keeping with the era of the design, the old hotel maintains a complete set of antique furnishes, and all the art on its walls are original works. Amazingly enough, the only thing that's important here is the underlined portion. This stuff, none of it matters. Remember to always eliminate those distractions. In keeping with. In fact, you could even add this portion here in keeping with the era of its design. It's not too important if you just want that context, but in keeping with. Yeah, you know, I've heard of that before. In keeping with the style of the seniors, in keeping with the formality of the meeting. If you don't know, in keeping with is a very difficult preposition or difficult idiom, but what it means is you're trying to maintain that style. You're trying to maintain the level that has been presented to you. So if you're at a business meeting and the business meeting is very informal, you would want to dress informally in keeping with the level of formality of the meeting. You would also dress very informally and only put on a t-shirt, for example. If all the students in the school are listening to Drake, then in keeping with the students' music preferences, you would listen to Drake. Now, what makes this the correct idiom? There's other things as well. Remember, with means that you're collaborating with someone, you're trying to work together to accomplish a goal. And in all the examples I gave you, with would be the best connector. You can't think of any other preposition that would work as well as with. Because let's say you had two comparisons, right? Because that's what you're doing. Let's say this comparison block would be you, and then this is everyone else. In a sense, you are working with everyone else to keep that level of formality or style or moderation. You aren't working to everyone. You aren't working for everyone. You're working with everyone. So that's why with is going to be the right preposition. That's why A is going to be the right answer, in keeping with. Another thing I wanted to point out is I looked this up just today, and A, no change, is the correct answer just about 35% of the time on the SAT grammar. Now, this is an important statistic to keep in mind because remember that you have a 25% chance if you're guessing, but A is slightly used more because that no change requires a greater knowledge of understanding of the grammar around you, right? Because you can't even use process of elimination sometimes with the no change. That's why it's used a little bit more often as the correct answer. So if you're ever unsure about something, maybe hint a little bit towards that A letter. All right, let's look at B. As keeping to the era of the design. No, because to, remember, I said this, we're not working to these people. We're not keeping to their styles. We're keeping with their styles. So B is going to be wrong. Let's look at C. By keeping with. This is tough. What's the difference between this one, in keeping with, and by keeping with? Well, you already know it's the preposition at the front. In keeping with. Now, by means a bunch of different things. It can mean location. You are by the entrance. It can also mean as a result of. So as a result of keeping with the style, the old hotel, whatever. So you might be thinking, well, by works, right? Now, the interesting thing about by is by never precedes a gerund. And what's a gerund? It's this keeping, this ing. In is a better preposition before a gerund. So instead of by keeping with, in keeping with sounds a little bit more formal. It's more used in the grammatical world. So it would be sounding a little bit more normal, a little bit more formal for this sense. And the question is, how are you going to answer that? How are you going to know that for the SAT? Well, it's important to know that, first of all, by, there's many different ways to interpret by, right? That preposition. I already talked about this. It could be used as a location preposition. Usually doesn't follow a gerund, but let's say you think it does. And you think, by, it works the same because, hey, by running 5 miles a day, Bill was able to complete the marathon. And, you think that you can make that connection. Well, no, be careful, slow down. By doesn't work here because it doesn't sound as formal. It's not used as much in a formal English language. Think about all the New York Times articles you've read. Again, going back to all the languages or all the conversations you've had with people, make sure to understand that by isn't used as much. And it sounds a little bit off, by keeping with. It isn't used as much as in keeping with. And the only way you would know that would be by reading New York Times articles, by reading a lot of books. So that's really the only distinction you can make is it sounds better because you've heard it more. So that's why C is going to be wrong as well. And then D, in keeping to, we address this. To is not the right preposition. You're not working to, you're working with. So the correct answer is going to be A. Okay, so let's move on. I want to say thank you once again for sticking through and watching all of our videos. There's more videos to come. If you really enjoy what we're doing, be sure to sign up for that Google form, which is in the description. That Google form is going to give you these live Zoom links that are held every Saturday. And we have tutors who speak English, Urdu, and Spanish who are going to be willing to help you with not only this topic, but all the other topics we've covered as well. And as always, be sure to subscribe. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.